when I heard that, I thought, like, do we care enough about our employees that we actually want them to have a better life? Not just a better career, not just better numbers for us or better production, but actually an investment in a better life. And I think with how fast our world is, with how connected we are to technology, to disconnect from technology, to slow down, to focus on moments, relationships, connection, the stuff that really matters in life and correlates to happiness, joy in life, connection, and the things that life is made of. Gosh, if we can just do that as an organization, what better gift could you give somebody? Better than a raise, I would argue. And man, there's a ton here, but I would just say, like, it makes your employees better humans, better moms, better dads. And I believe if they're followers of Jesus, ultimately more locked into their creator, and the benefits are just all across the board for this.
We get it. You're busy. You want to grow, and we want to help. You're passionate about your craft because it deeply matters to you. Your faith is important. It's your foundation. At Stay Forth, we coach leaders to avoid burnout, live and lead with clarity, purpose, and from a place of health. We want you to experience long-term impact. Welcome to the journey.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Alan, it's always good to be here with you. Even though we're thousands of miles apart, it's always good to sit on a virtual side of the screen with a cup of coffee with you. And I'm excited for today's conversation. I know we say that just about every episode, almost 460 in now, that they're all great. But I think it comes down to our heart for creating mutually transformative content. And today is nothing that's any different, just as great. We're talking sabbaticals, the power of sabbaticals, why they're becoming more mainstream, which is surprising and encouraging. And you're kind of the case study. So I want to jump right in. And how did you discover the power of sabbaticals?
Yeah. So what's interesting is I stumbled over sabbaticals. So anytime we start with the conversation, this is now one of my favorite things to talk about and to coach into, because of how powerful my first sabbatical was for me. I was pastor for many years, and our church had a sabbatical policy that was pretty new. And so honestly, when it came in, I was both excited and terrified, which I call terra-cited. And I was looking forward to this thing, but I had no idea how to plan for it. And the other folks on staff weren't super helpful because they had planned theirs so differently than I would. I had little kids at home, and it ended up being an incredible experience. I mean, we had just adopted 2 kids. And so, I mean, it had just been a whirlwind of a season. So I needed that time to connect with my family, to just slow down, to figure out what the heck had just happened in my life. And I was super grateful for it, but I had no guidance. And there were times when I kind of spun out a little bit in my head, when I thought I was a bad dad or I was a bad pastor. And I felt a little bit isolated as well, and realized, man, I really needed somebody to walk through that with me. And I did the best I could with what I had. Next time, did a little bit better, and experienced my second sabbatical while I was a pastor. And ultimately, those 2 experiences I have amazing memories of. I tripped over them in some ways, but they reconnected me with my family. My wife and I got on the same page. I made so many memories with my kids. And I went on some really cool adventures as well, even though the budget was so small that we had for that sabbatical. So I can honestly say those are some of the best summers of my life.
Yeah, I have this image of you like on a hike somewhere, and you like literally tripped and fell, and it's like, oh, I need a rest for an extended period of time.
Just laid down.
Like that one time we hiked through a dark cave and you ended up with like a giant goose egg on your shin.
That's a true story. I think there's a video out of that somewhere. So
there may or may not be a video somewhere. So from sabbatical into coaching, that's a big gap, and it's almost a tension of like, oh, I'm going to embark on this journey, or in this extended period where I'm going to receive, where I'm going to not do things, for other people. I'm going to replenish, I'm going to recharge, I'm going to be transformed, I'm going to slow down, to then like, oh, I want to just coach. How did you go from a couple sabbaticals into, how did that yield itself into coaching and serving leaders?
So I was doing a lot of leadership coaching, and a couple of the people that I was coaching said, hey, I've got a sabbatical coming up. Do you know anything about sabbaticals? And I kind of laughed, and I was like, well, I would do them a little differently than me, and here's how I would do them. I started laying them out. ultimately I created some tools, which is just kind of what I do to simplify complex things. And they said, oh my goodness, that was so helpful. And the bonus was we could just continue coaching. And so leadership coaching shifted to sabbatical coaching. Afterwards, it shifted back to leadership coaching. And that's where I really uncovered and saw these patterns of these 3 phases of sabbatical: prepare, experience, and reorient. I saw that people needed a roadmap. And so we created the sabbatical roadmap. Just the kind of questions that leaders needed, the way that they needed to talk to their spouse ahead of time and kind of co-design that together. So really, that was my chance to kind of be the coach that I never had during sabbatical. And that was the first thing. Secondly, after I kind of tripped over that, I realized I love this. And this is a huge impact on leaders. So this is an incredible tool to help leaders avoid burnout, stay healthy, and create healthy cultures, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And then I started pushing on them to actually make that a sabbatical policy and make sure that you're not the only one. And maybe it was like the head of the organization or the lead pastor. Make sure that the other pastors, the other people on staff, the other folks in the organization got to experience a sabbatical as well. So it was a pretty incredible time. And you remember that time, Jonathan, we were creating these tools and I was like, I think we got something here. Slowly it started to grow. And ultimately, there have been times where it's been over 50% of my coaching has been focused on preparing leaders for sabbatical, helping them walk through it. And as a return, a lot of those folks often become leadership coaching clients. And so we get to continue to walk with them and ultimately implement those changes that they wanted to or kind of were longing for on sabbatical. And we put them directly into their schedule. So it's been a phenomenal journey and completely unexpected to me. And I really had no idea it would lead to its own organization, which is Sabbatical Coaching Group. I mean, that's how much demand we're seeing for sabbatical coaching.
I think it speaks to sort of the heart of the entrepreneur or that driven individual, especially the entrepreneur, where you're experiencing something and then there's these different hairs that like ping up and you get to feel, oh, this is not just beneficial to me, but there's this other sense that kind of ticks off when you're experiencing something. And I've noticed it in you, and I've experienced it too, when you're receiving something and it's benefiting you, and then you sort of shift like everyone needs this, and then it prepares you to come back, as you said, with a clarified heart of like, oh, this is my unique design. I was created to serve leaders. This is another way that we can do this. And like you said, I want to ensure that I'm not the only one, or this concept is not foreign as it is, and it becomes more mainstream. And so that perfect segue into our next question. We've been discovering, and we're talking a lot about, one, there's a lot of misnomers around sabbatical. I remember serving on staff in ministry and fighting for someone to get a sabbatical and this being referred to as a giant vacation. Why are we going to pay for you to go on vacation? And so we've been discovering these conversations start with more and more people wanting to know. There's curiosity that's been evoked around them. And what we found is that more than just the leader benefiting from sabbatical, it is this top-down and out approach where the entire organization benefits. So what are just a few of those benefits that we've noticed?
First of all, what we do in sabbatical is we demystify it. Like you said, there's all these things floating around, and a couple of things are that the leader's not going to come back, that they have discipline issues, and people kind of start to wonder what's going on. So what we want to do is demystify that through education. We do that through webinars and other things. But even our tools are like, let's just simplify this process so you can see what it really is. But as we've demystified it, we've seen some pretty great results. What we're seeing, we talked a lot on this podcast about how sabbaticals are great for the leader. This time, let's talk about the organization. The leadership capacity goes up in an organization with a culture of sabbaticals. I've seen it now several times where the leader heads away and everybody else has to rise a little bit. Leader comes back and realizes, man, the water level rose on leadership in the organization. And now the leader doesn't have to do anything or have to do everything that they were doing before. And so these other folks kind of rose up to a new level. So I honestly think that it may be the best kept secret in leadership development. It is a leadership development tool, first of all. So I think that's huge to see. People come back sharper, just clearer vision. And who doesn't want a leader that comes back sharper on priorities? not just long-term vision, but like, what am I supposed to do each week? What's in my lane? What matters to me? Even when I came back from my recent sabbatical, we redefined our lanes to make sure that we were clear on that. So clarity goes up so many times with this. Vision and innovation. Even businesses now are talking about how if they send their leaders away for a time, they come back sharper, more innovation. They actually have more breakthroughs creatively. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why leaders say, I think I need a sabbatical. I'm just kind of creatively flat. I hear that a lot. I don't have the same kind of pop in my content or my teaching, my preaching, or whatever it is that they're producing in the organization. Longevity. Let's talk about longevity. Longevity is amazing for the organization, and it doesn't help to transition leaders in and out all the time. In fact, it hurts the organization. It burns through a lot of impact, burns through a lot of money, and just requires way more energy than it should. And so the longevity of leaders is huge. With that, organizations get known for this, which means that this can actually become a hiring benefit where people hear, man, they have a great sabbatical program. I look forward to that. And I know there are many leaders that are so tired, they think, oh, I'm done. But if I can make it to a year from now or 2 years from now, then they realize I'm actually okay. I just needed to rest. If there's no light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to see a lot of leaders leave. And unfortunately, when leaders are tired, they leave poorly. They're just kind of like, man, I'm out, and they bail. That hurts the organization big time. I want to read a quote by Patrick Lencioni, phenomenal. We've had him here on the podcast. Pat says, the single greatest advantage any company can achieve is organizational health. Yet it's ignored by most leaders. Like it almost feels too simple. And we talk about get healthy, reach sustainable impact, that it is possible to be a healthy and high impact leader. Well, what about being a healthy and high impact organization? And I believe that there's a huge correlation. And we've talked about it here on this podcast plenty of times. If our leaders are not healthy, if our organizational structure is not healthy and lead team is not healthy, that cascades down, and ultimately you're not going to be a high impact org. So those are several things that we're seeing, and over time it changes the culture. What we want is to not just have one leader go on sabbatical, but to have that lead team go on sabbatical, and ultimately a whole sabbatical program that's wisely distributed to the whole organization.
It does benefit from top down. It doesn't matter what level of leadership you're in. When someone hires you, you're an expense before you're an asset. Doesn't matter how skilled you are, how incredible you are at what you do, you're an expense before you're an asset. And then having a program in place that will help you when the time comes to step out and step back in just increases your longevity, and it sort of slows the revolving door that we live in now, where it's not uncommon for people to go work for a place. It's almost like the transfer portal in college sports, the corporate world has become, where like you go and work for someone, something's not right, you can use it to leverage to go somewhere else. And having a program like this in place, it does infect the entire culture of an organization by making it so much healthier. People now want to say, I want to be here and I want to stay here because I'm seen, heard, and known.
Absolutely. So that helps the organization. That also helps the leader to stay there. I mean, when I was a pastor, I was in the same place. I had various roles within that time for 13 years. And that helped me grow and develop. That helped my family not have to transition or move into a season. I mean, that throws everybody off. And transition is killing a lot of organizations right now, not just with the money, but of course it burns billions of dollars a year of people quitting and burning out and leaving suddenly, but it actually helps the leader to grow and mature and develop over time in the same place. Obviously, when it's time to go, it's time to go. But I saw a stat recently that from the time we're 18, if we work our whole lives, we'll have more than 10 jobs. And I think that's probably going to get more over time. Like you say, the transfer portal, and that doesn't even include side hustles. I mean, that's over 10 primary jobs. And I wonder if we can create workplace health, could we get that down to a smaller number and just see less transition, less having to move across the country, which adds to isolation? I think so many of these problems are connected, Jonathan. And if we see workplace health, then so many other markers go up. And it's like so much of our life we spend at work. But what if the quality of that team and that time is high? Well, of course, we're going to bring that home to our families. So that goes without saying. It's good for your org, good for the leader. It's also great for the leader's family. And that's just a huge one that we want to spotlight here.
And this is not just us saying this. if you're a listener or you're watching on YouTube and you don't follow on with Harvard Business Review, well, you should. An article just released by Harvard Business Review sharing the benefits of sabbatical. Alan, I thought it was mind-blowing and eye-opening. What was your major takeaway from it?
Oh man, it essentially validated everything that we are experiencing with ministry leaders and nonprofit leaders. So it's specifically focused on the business world. I'm going to read a couple of quotes from this article. I thought it was so powerful. The author, so he's a Harvard professor and lecturer who wrote this. He studied over 250 sabbaticals over 7 years, including his own. And here was his takeaway. Their impact is nearly always transformative. That's the same word that we use. Not it was good, it was helpful, they rested a little bit. It was transformative. And it didn't matter who the leader was, didn't matter how long the sabbatical was, as long as it hit the minimum length, where they went, what type of role they were in. It was nearly always transformative. What was interesting too, he described it, or people that went through sabbatical described it as a peak life experience, right there next to marriage or having a child. I mean, it was literally like, here's my life pre-sabbatical and here's my life post-sabbatical. Like, it gives you that much perspective, which I thought was phenomenal that people described it that way, because that's exactly what we're experiencing. The next quote is this. He said, younger generations say they value flexibility over compensation and purpose over prestige. Remember, this is not just a guy observing. This is research. This guy is poring over data. And so, has a pretty big sample size out there. But the fact that younger leaders, what they care about is changing, i.e., they would rather have a healthy workplace culture than make another $8,000 or $10,000 a year, and the prestige of a role that makes them look really, really important. These things have been changing, they are changing, and this study revealed that. So I just think that if you are an organization, you want to build a healthy culture, maybe you sit on a board and it's a nonprofit, maybe you sit on an executive team and you're like, we want to be relevant for 30 years. This is one of the huge moves to make, because it signals we care about you, we care about your family, we care about your health, and ultimately, we want to do life together here. I want to share one quick story. We're working with one organization. We actually do not just leadership coaching, but we do organizational consulting around sabbatical. Develop your sabbatical policy, implement your sabbatical policy. We'll be with you for the first few years to make sure you make the right moves and put this thing into motion. And there's this one church, and they looked around the table, and Justin, one of our coaches, and our consultant, and I are in this Zoom room, and they said, we love our team. We want to do life and ministry for a really long time together. And so how do we stay healthy? We believe sabbatical can be one of those. And I thought, that's why we do what we do. They want to build a culture. They want their families not to suffer from them being in ministry, but actually to benefit. So I love getting to hear those kind of stories. And we're hearing a lot and work with a lot of organizations now across the country.
At the end of the day, nobody really wants to hire continuously to maintain. We want to hire, we want to grow, we want to expand.
That's brutal.
To expand, like, oh man, it's like transfer growth. Oh, we're growing, we're hiring. Yeah, but it's a revolving door. And with you, I believe Sabbatical then can fill that, where you're now bringing in more people, but you're creating new roles and new opportunity. And there's this new healthy culture, and you're thriving by making people feel valued and wanted. And it really does just affect the entire organization, all the way down and out, from the people that buy, purchase, visit, receive, or take part in that organization will know the difference. So speaking organizationally, what are some of the expectations that an organization should expect when they implement a sabbatical program?
I have to say, it's not all roses. Like, it's not easy. And in fact, you burn more gas and take off. And so that means that up front, it's going to feel like a lot of work. And so our number one thought is this: don't do it alone. You should not. You need an outside partner. And that's who we are. We come along as the outside partner, not just to coach your leaders, but to actually work with your leadership team, especially Justin, who works on the organizational consulting side of it. We've got graphs and charts and numbers and things that other organizations have done that we're going to pull best practices over, so that burns as little gas and takeoff as possible. But just know that there's more effort required up front. And first of all, it's got to be bought into at the top. And so whether the top is the board or whether the top is the lead pastor or an executive pastor or the CEO, we recommend that that person goes first on their sabbatical. And with that, there are going to be fears. I mean, that's one of the biggest things we talk about in sabbatical coaching are the fears that come alongside of this. You're going on a bear hunt, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you got to go through it. You have to name the fears that a leader has heading into this and an organization has. The biggest one being our leader won't come back. That's usually what, like, our beloved leader, we want to take care of them, but you got to let them go. I promise you, distance makes the heart grow fonder. If they're supposed to come back, they are absolutely going to come back with a fire and with a passion. So just expect fears. We walk through those. There's nothing we're afraid of when it comes to a leader's fear. In that, in fact, we want to walk with the leader through those fears. Second, more energy, but it produces energy. So it will require more energy, but it produces a certain kind of energy in the organization of like, man, what'd you learn on your sabbatical? And what was sabbatical like? And there's this intrigue. And then it floats down to the other leaders to go, man, I have mine 2 years from now. I have mine 3 years from now. What should I do? And you begin to plan. I'm already thinking about my next one, that my wife will get a sabbatical from, she leads a foster care agency. She'll get a sabbatical. We'll get to do sabbatical together. So we're already talking about our plans for next one. And I think that's just a really healthy kind of energy and anticipation. The fearful experiences for the leader up front turn into these incredibly joyful experiences. So there's this kind of aroma of joy that comes out of teams when they miss their teammate, they cover for their teammate. So there's a lot of this, not just companionship, but comradeship, where I wanted to make sure you had such a great sabbatical that I was with your direct reports. I took some of your responsibilities, and that just kind of glues a team together. Expect your people to be grateful. That's one of the biggest things when people come back, and I experienced this. I went, man, I'm just so grateful. I am so grateful that you would love me and my family enough to give me time away when it may not benefit your bottom line. But the trick organizationally is it does benefit your bottom line, ultimately, all the reasons that we just talked about. Here's what's interesting. Another quote from this Harvard Business Review researcher, DJ Dodonna. He said, my research suggests that a sabbatical is more than just a long vacation. It's an investment for a better life. When I heard that, I thought, like, do we care enough about our employees that we actually want them to have a better life? Not just a better career, not just better numbers for us or better production, but actually an investment in a better life. And I think with how fast our world is, with how connected we are to technology, to disconnect from technology, to slow down, to focus on moments, relationships, connection, the stuff that really matters in life and correlates to happiness, joy in life, connection, and the things that life is made of. Gosh, if we can just do that as an organization, what better gift could you give somebody? Better than a raise, I would argue. And man, there's a ton here, but I would just say, like, it makes your employees better humans, better moms, better dads. And I believe if they're followers of Jesus, ultimately more locked into their creator, and the benefits are just all across the board for this.
I remember when you left for yours, you talk about everyone elevating. And I think what's cool is that if you're unfamiliar with sabbatical, there is a scarcity and there's a fear of like, like someone's going to be doing my job. Now they're not going to need me when I come back, or what's going to happen. What we found is we work the planning phase of the process together, leading up to it a year in advance. We were talking about this and you went on yours. And so that when you stepped away, it wasn't that people took things from other people. There was this mutual elevation so that when you came back into land, you didn't have to descend as much to hit the runway to come back in. You gained margin back in your leadership to say, oh, these are things that I can let go of so that I can continue to grow as a leader. Our team is risen, and the individual pieces within our organization all rose together and willfully took on more responsibility. Some of those you took back, but some of them we were like, hey, you know what? This just makes more sense. Like you talked about changing our roles, and it allowed everyone to operate more efficiently within the tasks that we do so that we could be more effectively with the relationships that we're trying to cultivate externally to transform more lives. And I think that's that can be when we talk about the fear of leaders leaving and the fear of things going, there's this mindset shift that has to take place. And when you say don't do it alone, when it comes to work in the process, work it together. Like work it with your team when we, instill these principles so that when someone leaves, you almost feel like you're helping them participate on their sabbatical while you're operating on crucial components back within the organization. Like in a lot of ways, you're on sabbatical with them, just in a different role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could not go on sabbatical if the team did not rise a little bit. And so that's, you don't rise because we want our leadership capacity to go up is the only reason. You rise because you love that person. You want them to have a great sabbatical. I remember doing this for teammates. Sure, I'll take on a little bit more. And then ultimately you realize, man, that came back to help us because we just rose to that new level. So again, the water level going up, that was not something that I heard about, but we just discovered it. Actually, recently, Jonathan, I coached a leader through sabbatical, and another leader they know said, man, that guy's on fire. That guy is doing less and producing more afterwards. What happened to him during sabbatical? And I just kind of chuckled. I was like, it's that powerful. He leaned into the coaching, and he came back and just really clear. I don't need to be doing that. That's the old season. Here's the new season. So organizational maturity, I guess, is the phrase and term that we can expect if you wisely implement a culture of sabbatical. Now, you could do this poorly, and that's why we say, please bring us in. We want to help you do this well. We've helped really large orgs and very small, like one person, small companies do this well. So it could go poorly, especially if you don't have guidance on that. But what we find is if you do this wise sabbatical one at a time, then the organization just expects it and just anticipates it. And ultimately, it becomes very, very quickly, I would say, within a year or two, it becomes this thing that people start to really look forward to. And it just kind of like travels through the organization. It's fun to watch.
It is pretty fun to watch. So as we land the plane, what else? What's the final 10%?
We're here. We're here. Utilize us. We want to go on this journey with you. We are approaching, I think we are at about 90 or so leaders that me and Justin together have coached through Sabbatical. And we have seen the trends. We have very simple tools that work. Again, we're going to educate and we're going to demystify Sabbatical on the front end, whether it's sitting with your board or your executive team up front to kind of watch those fears melt away. This is why we are here. We started Sabbatical Coaching Group and separated that from Stay Forth. And we realized leadership coaching is incredibly valuable. Sabbatical coaching is incredibly valuable. They're just very, very different. And we are growing for a reason, is because this is a moment, an idea. This is a new process whose time has come. We have an unhealthy relationship with work in our culture. And organizations are starting to see it. We're starting to see the fallout beyond just burnout and organizations falling apart, especially if they're smaller organizations kind of ceasing to exist. So we are here to partner with you. 2 ways to do that. First of all, Sabbatical Clarity Session. I've got 2 of these scheduled later today. This is just a leader that is ready to think about sabbatical, or they're ready to start planning sabbatical. That's when we step in and we work with that leader. Secondly, we want to do a clarity session that is consulting. So a sabbatical consulting session, we're fighting for clarity there. Both of these are free. And during that time, we just ask, why do you want to have a sabbatical program? What are your fears organizationally? Tell me about the organization. And we get the context to that. And that's usually Justin and I asking some questions and then ultimately saying, we think this is a good time, or this is a good fit, or this is a good chemistry we have to be able to work together. So you can find that below in the show notes. Head on over to sabbaticalcoachinggroup.com and just look around there. We also have some articles that you can look at and go, how does this impact the organization? How does this impact the leader? And just read for a while on that. We want to be your sabbatical companions on the journey with you. I know it's scary. I know it's disorienting and feels foggy, but I promise you, as we kind of guide you through this, that this can be an amazing risk, even if you're feeling some fear right now.
Yeah, before we get you out of here, I do want to remind you 2 things. This is timely on March 19th. Coming up, you can join us at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The information will be in the show notes below. or if you're watching on YouTube, you can click the link. Sign up for our next Demystifying Sabbaticals webinar. These are highly practical. They always draw a really good crowd. People are curious. They want to ask questions. This one, Demystifying Sabbaticals, why they matter, how to maximize them. You can get the information for that below. If you're listening to this today and you're wondering, man, I'd like to have this conversation with my team, you can also download. We have a great free resource we created called 5 Reasons Sabbatical Strengthens Your Entire Organization. It will walk you through all the 5 benefits from the individual, their family, all the way up through top level in the organization. I would highly encourage you to download that, take it to your team, to your board, and start the conversation. And as Alan said, take advantage of a free sabbatical clarity session to answer those questions. We are here for you. We want to walk alongside you to help you have the healthiest, most thriving organization and thriving leaders out there. And we believe we can do that through the power of sabbatical. So with that, we'll see you right back here next week on another episode of Stay Forth Leadership Podcast.